Critical security control number 1. You cannot defend what you don't know exists. Hey, Brian Hoagley here with SideChannel. Welcome back to Sizzle Life. My intent over the next series of videos is to go over all of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework Controls version 1.1. Let's begin. The first control area to go through is asset management, and then followed by business environment, governance, risk assessment, risk management, and a new category in version 1.1, supply chain risk management. The first category identifies asset management. This is where the data, personnel, devices, systems, and facilities that enable the organization to achieve business purposes are identified and managed consistent with their relative importance to the organizational objectives and the organization's risk strategy. The first control within this, probably one of the most important and one of the ones that is not necessarily done the best, or if at all, but physical devices and systems within the organization are inventoried. Okay? Critical security control number 1. You cannot defend what you don't know exists. So this control outlines really, do you have an inventory list of all of the systems within your environment? Again, within your environment can be your headquarters, it can be your remote people, whatever it is. You have systems, you have data that is happening or exists within these spaces. You have individuals working at places like Starbucks with assets. You have cloud initiatives. You have data that sits in there. Okay? This control is around the physical devices and systems. So, do you have an inventory list of the components of the system that have been developed, documented, and maintained that is consistent within the system boundary? When you look at this question, you want to look at everything that you own being the system boundary for your organization. Physical devices. So starting with that. Do you have all of the laptops, desktops, servers, iPads, phones, phone systems, whatever it is? Do you have all of that fully inventoried? Do you know what they are? Does that list include the components of the system that have been developed, documented, and maintained? So at least you have some level of tracking and reporting. Again, this control is really just about knowing what do you have, or do you have physical systems and devices that are on your network, accessing your data, being used by your people that are completely unknown to you? So probably one of the easiest controls to do, especially for a startup, greenfield kind of organization, even up to mid-market. A little harder to do when you get into larger enterprises, but not impossible. So first control, really, do you have physical devices and systems within your organization inventoried? Simple question to ask yourself as to whether or not you meet this control. Do you allow people to install any software? The second control underneath asset management within the Identify family are software platforms and applications within the organization inventory. So similar to the first control where we were inventorying physical assets, here's where we're looking at software, platforms, applications, those types of things. Do you have them inventoried within your organization? So some questions to be asking yourself. Has an inventory of the components of the system been developed, documented, and maintained to accurately reflect the current system? Again, NIST traditionally started out with looking at very system views, but we've broadened its usage to an organizational level. So the question really here is, again, within your environment, whether it's your HQ, okay, or your remote location, okay, or your cloud instance, or Bob or Sally working at Starbucks, do you have the software that is being leveraged by these folks, used, installed, wherever it is? Do you know what it is? Okay. Do you have an inventory of it? Do you have the inventory of the components? Is there a defined list of software programs not authorized to execute within the system? Do you have a defined list of software programs that are authorized to exist? Simple question to ask yourself as to whether or not you meet this control. Do you allow people to install any software onto the systems that are on your network, or do you block that? Simply probably tracing back to administrative privileges, local administrative privileges, things like that are going to be a telltale sign as to whether or not you do this and manage this control effectively. Do you allow your development or your product that you have sitting up in a cloud, whether or not it's Azure, or AWS, or Google, wherever it is, do you allow your developers to be able to install directly into your production environments and operate? Or are you looking at some type of a clearinghouse, right? Some type of central repository where everybody goes in, all of the software is reviewed, and then out of this, and only out of this, is an authorized list of software that can be leveraged into your HQ, into your cloud environment, can be installed into remote devices or remote locations, whatever it is. Do you have a firm control and grasp on the software that is within your environment and being leveraged? Now, one thing that hits me about these first two controls, both Asset Management 2 and Asset Management 1, are when you look across other control sets, specifically the critical security controls, these two are really bubbled into the very first two controls for the CSC Top 20. So, you know, if you're looking at, or if you've seen the CSC 20, critical security controls used to be called SANS 20, FBI Top 20, whatever. But looking at these, control number 1 and number 2 are identical to the NIST cybersecurity framework controls. Now, NIST is not in order as you read it, but it is interesting that the first two controls you run across within the NIST cybersecurity framework happen to be the priority 1 and 2 controls that the Center for Internet Security has developed with the top 20. Again, I can't stress enough, you cannot defend something that you do not know exists. So, having an inventory of both of your hardware and your software are a step in the right direction to be able to figure out what it is that you have to eventually defend when it comes to cybersecurity. The third control in the asset management subfamily is organizational communication and data flows are mapped. This happens to be one of my favorite. Regularly, whenever I sit down with an organization, a client, ask about two things usually. Show me the architectural diagram, show me the data flows for this system. Because from there, I can help make a decision about the risk you're talking about when it comes to that system, that application, whatever. I'm a visual learner. Can't tell. And I also need to understand, really, you know, does the system that we have set up, right, is it communicating over what? Something as simple as the ports, protocols, and services. Is it communicating over port 80 in HTTP? Okay, great, good to know. Now I know that this is the communication path. Is the is the back-end system some SQL environment and it's running over 1433 to a database? Okay, good to know. This type of a simple drawing and mapping, while yes, it takes work to do, it's incredibly illustrative of what it is that you're looking to do. Now you basically have the map of what you're talking about. Not everybody can walk through a very text-laden document and understand the same thing. I think what we need to do is understand other people's learning styles and start applying that. But either way, every time we've done organizational security postures, reviews, setups, even within the DoD, you'll see that they're looking for SSPs. They ask you for, plain and simple, network architecture, network diagram. Show me how this is laid out. What was your intent with these systems? So, In order to meet this control, clearly having your architecture diagrammed, clearly having the data flows between systems and your intended paths, right? If you had your firewall sitting here, did you actually mean for all of those high ports to be allowed in? Did you allow for anybody internal to be able to make DNS calls on port 53 out to an external resolver? Probably not. Well, having an understanding and being able to take this diagram, provide it to either an auditor or your security team, working hand in hand with your security team, becomes really easy and really clear very quickly what it is that you intended to do and what you currently have, so that you can ideally identify and then address the risk. Remember, this isn't just to create busy work for you and your organization or the network teams or the IT teams or even the security teams or whomever. The intent of this control is to lead towards identifying the assets, identifying the data flows, being able to understand what's inside of your environment so you can then better categorize it, you can establish criticality on it, and you can understand too, do you allow things that you shouldn't? And having a map allows you to clearly and quickly identify if you have an issue or if you don't. The fourth control in asset management: do you have external information systems cataloged? Are all of your external information systems cataloged? Now, I'll probably catch some flack, but I'm not trying to represent the whole, everybody has a Bastion host type of, everything's on-prem, but follow me for the illustration. If you're operating a headquarters environment, even leveraging your cloud, some type of a cloud platform, cloud provider, you even have remote workers out there working from wherever, remote offices, coffee shops, from their car, parking lot, whatever it is, from home. Hopefully, through the first couple controls, what all of your assets are. The external systems, right, are those that you rely on, whether they are SaaS providers or, other locations that are providing services for you or you're accessing. And I guess one area, when you're looking at this control is, do you have a full understanding of what you also access? Case in point, and this comes into play when you start looking at, do I need a CASB or not? But identifying what are your people accessing? Say these are representing websites here, or even just systems and applications. But, your internal teams, your security teams, ideally have some type of a capability to be able to monitor and protect what's going on the assets that you're managing, that you as an organization own. You want to be able to see and know that you're only allowing your folks to access the things that they need to. If suddenly now you have an asset that is unknown to you and it seems to be doing what would be considered regular business operations, i.e., it's very similar to the other systems or applications or platforms that your people are using, this now becomes an interesting predicament and issue for security teams to have to address. They see something that looks legitimate. They're not entirely sure because they don't know if that's an area that should be used. For example, there are a lot of different providers out there that provide file sharing services. Dropbox, Box, Microsoft, right? If your corporate approved is the Microsoft because you're a Office 365, E135, whatever license, and everyone should be using OneDrive, suddenly you're seeing a significant amount of access and activity going on Box, Dropbox, something else. Your security team, rightfully so, is going to raise some eyebrows and start investigating. Well, turns out that maybe your marketing department was allowed to be able to leverage the Box.com because it made it easier for them to work large files or whatever with an outside agency or other business partner. Not knowing that creates work for your security team who you've charged with protecting the organization and the assets. So having a full understanding and a full catalog of your external systems, having that documented back to the first couple controls that we've been discussing, allows for your organization to not create work that doesn't really create value. Once you identify this system, and my recommendation is that you identify that and then quickly move that into your documentation that outlines that that is an approved or now cataloged system, application, platform, whatever. But as soon as you identify these things having valid business use case and reasons for use within your organization, take the time right then and there, identify it, roll it into your current inventory, satisfying controls 1 and 2 of this family or subfamily, and then now satisfying control number 4. Asset management control number 5 is an interesting one. Probably one that gets glossed over a little too much. But are the resources, all of these types, are they prioritized based on their classification, criticality, and business value to the organization? So are the systems actually categorized according to management's intent, their understanding? Do you have that risk management view that establishes what the criticality is for different types of assets or intellectual property or systems or business, whatever it is? Do you have that within the organization? And then are your resources lined up against those? Does your organization identify what critical information system assets exist? For example, if the system that you're running inside of your on-prem data center, or that you have running inside of your cloud, if that's making you $2 million a day in business, perhaps based on the criticality of that revenue stream to your organization, you should be looking at and protecting that system, whatever it is, or all the systems that make up that business driver. You should probably be protecting it more so than one that provides significantly less value. So, having an asset a criticality alignment, right, to your systems based on a set of criteria and an understanding from the business. Is it revenue driving? Is it risk driving? Is it loss driving? Whatever the definition is that moves the needle for you to then establish what's critical, have you actually lined up and put a value then to your assets? And this isn't necessarily, this one server is a priority 1 and this server is a priority 2. Think about it a little larger, a little more macro than that, okay? Does the suite of systems that make up this business value, does the suite of systems, right, require a criticality? Okay, if you don't have that many systems and you can actually go down to the server level or even the application or the process level, great. But when you're starting out with this, try to create a macro view of what it is that drives value, produces value, keeps your business being a business. Having this criticality established will help you further on in the rest of the controls in order to determine where you're going to put your protections, where you're going to put your detections, where you're going to put your response efforts, and obviously where you're going to manage the best bang for your buck, the ROI, on your recovery operations. Control number 6 in this subfamily, I believe, is actually a new one for version 1.1 in the NIST CSF. And it reads, cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for the entire workforce and third-party stakeholders are established. I think we're really looking now more towards the individuals. So up till this date, we've been talking about systems and applications. But as we have folks working inside of our organization, we need to be able to ensure that they have the roles and responsibilities understood and at least defined. So understanding can come later. But does the security team assign roles and responsibilities in accordance with the policies that are set forth in the organization? Okay. Have you actually established who's responsible for security for you, your business, your organization, whatever? Does the system security plan that you have set up and for the org, does it address the scope of the security program? I.e., does the security program only focus on corporate or the enterprise or product security, right? Is there clear defined scope as to what is the responsibility for that organization? Looking kind of further down the line within the NIST CSF, you'll see, the recovery controls later, and this alludes to a connection with those. But the contingency plans, right, for the organization, are they distributed? Control number 6 in this subfamily, I believe, is actually a new one for version 1.1 in the NIST CSF. And it reads, cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for the entire workforce and third-party stakeholders are established. I think we're really looking now more towards the individuals. So up till this date, we've been talking about systems and applications. But as we have folks working inside of our organization, we need to be able to ensure that they have the roles and responsibilities understood and at least defined. So understanding can come later. But does the security team assign roles and responsibilities in accordance with the policies that are set forth in the organization? Okay. Have you actually established who's responsible for security for you, your business, your organization, whatever? Does the system security plan that you have set up and for the org, does it address the scope of the security program? I.e., does the security program only focus on corporate or the enterprise or product security, right? Is there clear defined scope as to what is the responsibility for that organization? Looking kind of further down the line within the NIST CSF, you'll see, the recovery controls later, and this alludes to a connection with those. But the contingency plans, right, for the organization, are they distributed in detail to the key folks within the organization? And are the plans actually communicated to the defined folks? So having an established group, identifying who within your organization is going to be responsible for security, making sure that they understand what their roles are within that security team, and you might actually be the one and only person who has that role, but do you actually understand now, you or your team, understand what the scope of your responsibility is? Is it just within the enterprise and corporate? Does it extend to your product development, maybe your research? Do you have a play within mergers and acquisitions if your company is in that field, right? What is the scope of work that's expected of you? And this helps out twofold. One, you understand what you're responsible for. Two, the organization understands what you're actually responsible for and not responsible for. So there's none of this later on, well, I thought Bob was in charge of that because he was the CISO or he was the security guy or girl. Not a great spot to be in. Having a full understanding between you and the organization of what the roles and responsibilities are of security, for security, and by whom allows everybody to clearly understand what can actually be done, what will not be done. And it then allows you to address areas of risk should it come up later. You could have the position, hey, we're not currently looking at product security or application security within an organization because that traditionally hasn't been the role of the security team within this organization, for example. You could then use that information and this control, along with some other controls later on, to be able to then outline why that might be an area in which you need to address for addressing risk within the organization. You could then leverage that control, if you're following the NIST cybersecurity framework, to then show that that creates a risk for the organization, and perhaps it's one that the organization needs to be able to address effectively. From there, you can then make your play to either get increased resourcing, funding, whatever, so that you can then support managing that risk, or have the organization acknowledge that it's a risk that they are willing to accept.
Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well today. Thanks for watching. This was CISO Life Classic Rewind. Big fan of classic rock and the radio shows that used to run things like this. Looking forward to doing this on Fridays, trying to go back to some of the older concepts and ideas that we've had out there. Still looking to finish up the NIST cybersecurity framework, so stay tuned for that. And hopefully everything's coming through. All right, good, sounds working. So, always fun to do things live, see how things are. Please comment down below, tell me your thoughts, tell me what you want me to go over and what to cover. I'll be in and out of the Lightboard studio to be able to do some of these things, so let's, I want to be able to, put some information out there that's important to you. So Let me know, comment down below, share this with your friends, and I will see you next time. Everybody stay safe, stay sane, help your neighbor, help your friends, and have a great weekend. Take care. Bye.
Control number 6 in this subfamily, I believe, is actually a new one for version 1.1 in the NIST CSF. And it reads, cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for the entire workforce and third-party stakeholders are established. I think we're really looking. Hey, Brian Hoagley here with SideChannel. Welcome back to Sizzle Life. My intent over the next series of videos is to go over all of the NIST cybersecurity framework controls version 1.1. As you can see, we have a slew of functions and families and categories and identifiers. We'll walk through all of this with you individually, each control, one by one, with an explanation of what it is, what it can do, other questions you should ask, my own personal take on it, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun during